we can, there we go. Look at that. I don't even have to speak. I'm all set, except welcome to the afternoon session here on Wednesday, February 5th of the House Transportation Committee. We have some returning guests following up on some previous testimony and bringing us some new information. Andrea Wright and Patrick Murphy, two of our regulars here in House Transportation. We are glad to have you back. Glad that you're back in the building. So we'll hand it off and let you guys take us from there. I think you received an email from the committee assistant on follow-up testimony about where we're at and what's next. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. For the record, I'm Andrea Wright. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at VTrans, and I lead the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Group, which oversees the implementation of the incentive programs, and joined by Patrick Murphy, who is now the State Policy Director, but was formerly in the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Group, and he was directly overseeing the implementation of the incentive program. So we're going to tag team this presentation. Let me see. It's going to move now. So yeah, we are providing this testimony for the requirements of the 2024 T-Bill Act 148, Section 20 and 21 included specific requirements for reporting on our incentive programs annually, all of the incentive programs that we've implemented since 2020. The testimony that we provide today is complementary to the report that was provided earlier this week, and builds off the testimony that you already heard on the overview that Patrick provided. I think it was on the 21st of this month on our program. So I'll start things off and kind of give an overview of programmatically overall, and then Patrick will get into some more specific details about each of the programs. So our programs, again, are in support of the Global Warming Solutions Act and the targets that were modeled for the Climate Action Plan. You've seen this information before. You've probably seen this slide many times now, but we do have some preliminary fourth quarter data that we haven't shared before. So showing almost 18,000 EVs registered in Vermont now. So we are continuing to see growth in the EV transitions.
Yes, just Representative Burt.
Having trouble getting.
Yeah, it's true.
Is that everybody?
It's true.
I have it on mine. I don't know if you need to refresh.
Maybe refresh. Yeah.
To me.
Sorry, I've got 4 copies that I brought, and we were a little late.
Yeah, actually, I would like a physical copy.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, luckily I've only gone over slides that you've seen before.
And since we're on this slide, thought I had, was it 17,000? What were we at? We're at 17 now? So we're
Yeah,
seeing
their data in the last quarter of last year showing close to 18.
now we're almost 18, so it's 1,000 in a quarter. Okay. 1,000 in a quarter is still only 4,000 a year. That doesn't sound like it's gonna do that. That's not a steep enough, it's not a steep enough angle on that public math. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Is everybody all set and what we need? Okay.
And Representative Pouch already has.
And I know we talked about this sort of goal of 15%. When we get to 15%, we wanted a mileage-based user fee or some way to capture those. And so as of the first of the year or the end of 24, what percentage are we at?
We don't, for the record, Patrick Murphy, State Policy Director for the Agency of Transportation. We don't have the last quarter of data. We have just the estimates. It still has to be cleaned. So we expect that in the next, couple of days. But the third quarter of last year, so 2024, July through September, we were at 13.6%. And then the first month of the last quarter, October 2024, we were at 14.6%. So,
So we're there.
so we're nearly there. We're not necessarily there, but of course, it's not like a magic number where suddenly the switch turns on and you don't have to worry about anything. So it's, we're getting into the basically the next phase of EV adoption where more mainstream consumers are adopting the technology.
So you saw this slide in our last presentation on the topic as well. Just to remind you, these are the 5 programs established, and the funding that has been authorized and then repurposed through subsequent authorizations, and also through the authority that was provided to VTrans to be able to flex funds between programs. So to date, we have issued over $27 million in incentives for well over 6,000 vehicles at this point. The programs have collectively enabled the purchase of almost 4,000 all-electric vehicles, 1,500 plug-ins, hybrids, 550 hybrid electric vehicles, and then 539 e-bikes, and also enabled the retirement of over 450 internal combustion engines through the Replace Your Ride program.
How many bikes did we, or how many cars did we buy?
We bought 6,000, we incentivized over 6,000, close to 7,000. And then, of course, all of our programs are income-based, with the greater incentives going to the lower incomes. And because of that, 79% of our funding has gone to lower income Vermonters. So this is showing our geographic distribution of incentives over the life of the programs. Really, what I take from it is that it draws a parallel to what we've heard from the surveys that we've conducted, that people are, the people that are seeking to adopt and looking at our incentive programs are those people that feel more confident in making the decision and making the transition. They can travel with less range anxiety, so more populated and densely developed areas. So they just have a more confidence in adopting rather than somebody maybe from a more rural area. And again, showing how our incentives are benefiting low-income Vermonters, with greater than 60% of incentives going to the lower income bracket, and also that the incentives are supporting the adoption of cleaner vehicles overall, with greater than 60% going to all electric vehicles. Here, we're looking at incentives per program and income bracket over time. Really shows how the programs have increasingly benefited lower income Vermonters. That sort of bright green or deep green, I guess, the new PEV low income, really growing throughout time. And that's the low income designation there. Yes.
What's low, Jim Casey, Hubbard, what's low income? What's the?
Sure. So we have 3 different tax filing categories. It's married filing jointly, which is $90,000 or below. Head of household, so a single individual that's caring for dependents, that's $75,000 or below, and then an individual is at $60,000.
Okay.
That's for, just to clarify, that's for the new PEV program and for the e-bike program. For Mileage Smart, this is a used vehicle program. It's a different, it's a different income category where it's based on 80% of the state area median income. So that allows for families that are larger, for example, to still make slightly more income and still qualify.
Can I go out every year and buy an electric vehicle and get incentives? Like if I went and, like, say I took advantage of the program today, a year from now, can I turn around and go buy another electric vehicle and take the incentive program again?
No, it's limited to 1 per lifetime.
Okay, cool. All right. Didn't know that.
That's one of the changes that is noted here that we made as we saw, a quick spend down in funds, and we wanted to make sure that we're really incentivizing and encouraging the people that haven't yet kind of made that effort to go electric.
Well, that's individual in that household, right?
That's per individual, yeah.
So your spouse or significant other.
They can go get one, right? Yeah. My wife wanted to get one, she could get one.
But yeah, and then here, looking at the types of vehicles that have been adopted through the programs, we see that they have increasingly supported more lower emitting vehicles over time. So again, that green bar being the all electric vehicles. So as you saw in the last two slides, the incentives have definitely increased over time. The programs really picked up towards the end of 2023, and then in calendar year 2024 through the first half of that, we really saw that being pretty steady. And then with that growth and what we were looking at, the funding that we had remaining, we projected that the incentives would last throughout this past year through December. And then application volumes really picked up in July and August, almost doubling what we had been seeing as the average, the higher average that we had been seeing. So really quite a spike. Our administrator informed us of that increase at the very end of September. And then we quickly realized the rate of approvals that the fund would be exhausted sooner than anticipated. So the new PEV, the Replace Your Ride, and the Mileage Smart programs were closed on October 8th. We stopped taking any further applications, any new applications. We continued to process the applications that were people had already applied for, and so they could come back to us, both dealers and individuals. There's terms in the guidelines, 15 days for dealers, 60 days for individuals to be able to submit for reimbursement for the incentive. So we honored that, and to be able to pay out everything that we had received, we had to do a transfer of funds from Mileage Smart and some of the admin funds that we had reserved. So $415,000 went into the programs to make sure everybody was paid out.
So what I heard you say is because we were hoping for this grant, we didn't get the grant.
Right.
You had kind of thought, okay, this should get us to the end of the year. So it's increased the amount of users applying and getting the grant. Do you have a reason why it may have done that? One, is it because people knew or had been told, hey, the funds are running out, you better jump in? Or is it really just a surge or a change in the rate?
I will start off by saying one of the things that we saw is that people were offering leases and really advertising. Dealers were really advertising really low rates on leases, and these incentives could go to leases. So we saw a spike in that. So it drew things down pretty
Like an
quickly.
opportunity for car dealers who can lease, they see that as a way to reduce the cost, monthly cost. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there was, it's really more of the latter that the sort of confluence of lots of automakers kind of having a lot of these leasing deals that people took advantage of. There wasn't really enough time. It was spent down so quickly in the month of September into the first week of October. There wasn't that much time for people to sort of react to what might happen. So I think it was really the automakers kind of taking that the federal tax credits into account and being able to really push out some significant leasing deals.
Yeah, I know I was shopping for a vehicle at that time, and it was, with all the incentives stacked up and dealer incentives, manufacturer incentives and deals that they had going on, you could easily chop off $20,000 off the top of the vehicle. So definitely made things appetizing.
So just to follow up, so this is good. It's getting cars out there and an expectation there'll be more used EVs out there. Of course, I assume there's no reason the dealer, if somebody doesn't buy the lease, they give it back to the dealer. There's no requirement they resell it in Vermont. Or do we know what that behavior is expected to be?
So there's no requirement that they resell it in Vermont. That would be tricky thing to attach to the incentive. We did have that for the Electrify Your Fleet program. So it's a part of the grant terms that, people make all reasonable efforts to resell within the state of Vermont. So that was the intention behind that program in particular. And leasing arrangements was the reason we had been subsidizing them at the same rates was for this reason, to begin to create just much more used vehicle market where most people make their purchases. So there is, so I think it is sort of important to take that into account. That you can't necessarily, ask the dealerships that they must resell within the state of Vermont. But the other thing that's interesting to note is, and you all will get some testimony on this maybe tomorrow, with the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulations, is one of the ways that automakers are able to take advantage of compliance credits is by making sure that off-lease vehicles are sold within the state. So there is an ability, as we see these regulations really go into effect in model year 2026, we're going to have a lot of these leasing deals that come due, for resale or buyback within the next couple of years. And so that presents an opportunity both for compliance for the automakers, so they don't necessarily need to reach, 35% in the first model year, but also for folks who wish to make that used vehicle purchase.
Thank you.
Sure.
And a large part of why these programs has been successful is due to the marketing and outreach that has gone along with the rollout and the implementation of the programs. Drive Electric Vermont is the principal organization responsible for marketing and outreach related to our clean transportation incentive programs. They have contracts with the state of Vermont. They have contracts with electric distribution utilities and with our program administrator, the Center for Sustainable Energy, to support consumers and businesses and dealerships with information on incentives, offers, rebates, and tax credits. They have a really helpful and useful website that has just recently been updated. Tons of information on all the different programs, but also resources so that you can do some calculations on what it would cost you to adopt an EV, lease an EV, a lot of information on what models are available, just a really rich resource that they put out. There's also an incentive dashboard throughout the life of the programs. On that website, they had translated information from several different languages that they work with Africans living in Vermont. So there was French, Mandarin, Nepali, Spanish translation, so that those are still all on their website. They held lots of events where they did tabling and ride and share. So ride and drive, so people could bring their vehicles that they owned and let people take a ride and see what it would be like to drive an electric vehicle, because some people just don't know and they don't want to approach the dealerships quite yet. Just gave them a way to get exposed to what an electric vehicle is like. They held quarterly stakeholder meetings. They have quite a group of stakeholders that they meet with and educate and provide resources for, dealership trainings and incentives that they administer. They worked with Green Savings Smart and other community organizations. They met individually with organizations like Capstone and just help them navigate and help their clients and people that they were helping. So lots of good information coming from Drive Electric Vermont through our contract with them and also through the Center for Sustainable Energy. And then we had, of course, our website, social media posts, newsletters, coordinating with the Climate Action Office on their newsletters to get information out about our programs. So lots of marketing and outreach that definitely contributed to the success of the programs.
Are these programs gonna go on forever, or are they gonna wean out sometime?
Well, they've weaned out already.
Great question.
So three of them weaned out in October. It's less of a weaning than a just rush. And then the two remaining programs are the Electrify Your Fleet, which has about $300,000 within it, and the e-bike program has just a small amount. I don't know what the latest number is, but it's probably less than
It's
20,000.
20,000.
Yeah, there or so.
it looks like it's. I mean, I see quite a few electric cars on the road. I don't know how many more years we're supposed to foster the electric cars when there's probably some genius right now that's in school now. It's probably gonna come up with some sort of a different way for us to propel our rear ends around the state. You know what I mean? I just get involved with that next. Say some other invention comes along, we can go all out and put tons and tons of money, you know, to foster an industry that, if it's really great, should stand on its own. I mean, sorry, I've said that a couple times, and apologize for
No,
those
I
who've already
think,
heard it.
you know, we have the Global Warming Solutions Act that we're working towards, and it's the, this is one of the biggest gains that we get in greenhouse gas reductions in the transportation sector. Transportation contributing a large part of our greenhouse gas emissions in Vermont, 40%. So that's one way, but we're also looking at active transportation, public transportation, many different ways to bring down the greenhouse gases.
Are other states doing the same thing we're doing to the degree that we're doing it? As far as with the electric vehicles, I mean,
Incentive programs?
yeah, are they all doing the same thing? I mean, I know the government was, I don't know if we're still going in the future. And what will the government do to? It's kind of an impact when the government backs out of EV incentives. Do we save the world from the little state right here? And I mean, it seems like we're we're a little tiny state. We're doing a lot of things. We're trying to force people to buy cars within the state. Quite frankly, if I was being forced for certain rules to buy a vehicle, I'm gonna go over to New Hampshire. We take a lot of business over New Hampshire.
I'll have to just jump in the part where the agency in this case has got to report where we're at with the vehicle incentive programs. As far as we asked for vehicle incentive programs in the BAA, and they aren't included at this point, but that bill hasn't been passed yet. And in the transportation bill for 2026 will be that discussion, should anybody want to add them, or other bills that are potentially coming. But right now, the programs that this committee decided to fund last year have basically run out of money. And so the state is not currently incentivizing electric vehicles. This committee, and combined with the Senate, will decide whether we are or are not, at least in our budgets, going to do that moving forward. But in this case, the agency has to report where we're at. And the state does have a legal obligation under the Global Warming Solution Act currently to try to pursue it. So that is also under a debate in the bills, but not for our committee at this point, because we're not responsible for Global Warming Solution Act in transportation. So the answers to a lot of those questions are out there, but they're not in this committee and they're not on this particular topic.
There are a lot of things that are going on.
You're right.
Of course, the reports that we have provided on the transportation funding study, and there's a cap and invest study that would, produce revenues that could potentially go to continue to fund these programs. So there's a lot of different things that are happening in the state right now that.
I could see this money going to other needy programs. That's all. I mean, you want to buy an electric car, go buy one. I don't really feel like I should pay for it.
And that's part of the conversation that will be going forward.
Yep.
But not as far as the policy part, it'll be about what's in the 2026 bill. So that's all right. They're here to report. They don't set the policy. We do. Representative Burke, please.
Yeah, I just want to add that it's, first of all, nobody's forcing anybody to buy an electric car, but people have been able to buy cars for about, in some cases, half price for a new car, if in the right category. And it's particularly with the mileage smart program, it's allowed a lot of really low income people to have transportation, or to get into transportation where they're not driving cars that use up a lot of gasoline. So it's really, at the same time as we're cutting emissions by having electric vehicles, it also is providing more affordable transportation for people. And that's the reason why people really want, a lot of the reason why people want to buy these vehicles. They're very cheap to run and a big help in terms of people's household budgets.
In terms of reporting, do you want to take over from here?
Sure. I'll also just say, the risk of sounding like a Rogaine commercial. I was not only the former manager of these programs, but also a client. Obviously not of the Rogaine.
Well done. You got me on the edge of my seat there. I didn't know where you were going. That was excellent.
But it allowed our family, which is a single car household, to be able to have an affordable, means to get around and to do so in a way that doesn't impact everybody else around us in our neighborhood. And so that's been a great help to us, and it is an appreciated policy. We'll get into just sort of some of the elements of the report that was required, and just the geographic distribution of where the incentives have gone. And you can see it does tend to be in some of the more urban areas where there is more availability of charging infrastructure. This, I believe, is in absolute terms, so it's not sort of normalized for per capita in terms of zip code distribution. If you're able to look at it in that way, it would seem a little bit less Chittenden County focused and more widespread across the state. But as Andrea had mentioned earlier, the majority of these funds historically have gone to folks with lower incomes, and that has improved year over year. And in last year, 2024, we had the highest amount going both towards folks with lower incomes, over I think over 70%. This is looking this.
You want me to make it clear?
Yeah, no, this says 64%. That's the number of households, so percentage of households. But the overall amount of funding is actually closer to 80% going to folks with lower incomes. And then this is, again, the number of deals that were made, the PHEV versus all electric vehicles. So 80% of all the vehicle deals were fully electric, where we're getting the sort of biggest bang for our buck. Excellent.
I'm sorry, Patrick, real quick on that slide that was on the map. The bottom white 1 to 5, does that mean the grays that are up there are the 0 or there's no, or has every town had at least one?
The grades there are 0.
Okay, so the gray is 0, the white is at least 1.
That's right.
Not quite 100% of each town has had at least one, but that's awfully close.
Right. And so that's really, I mean, there's obviously the difference in population size in the Northeast Kingdom, but it's also probably the availability of dealerships where people can go to buy the vehicles. And then there's also just the availability of charging infrastructure. And then, of course, travel patterns and what makes sense for a certain household. So we definitely have more work to do there. Appreciate pointing that out. This shows just the changes that were made legislatively. So, well, the first change was done within the program. We just spoke about that, limiting it to one incentive lifetime. And then we increased the minimum electric range from 20 a 20-mile range up to 30, which eliminated some of the heavier plug-in hybrid vehicles and ensured that we were getting more effective returns from those incentives. And then in July, following language that was authorized in this last transportation bill, unfortunately, we were able to use that language to support people whose vehicles were damaged in the floods. And we did that, you might remember, in 2023 as well, using prior authorizing language. But this allowed us to do it to greater effect. So you can see here just historically that we have more funding going to folks with lower income, more funding going to fully electric vehicles. This gets to Representative Pouch's questions about leases. So we saw a dramatic increase from Q2 to Q3 of last year, up to almost 80% of the incentives going towards leasing deals, and that would be something that we would look at in the future if there were additional funding appropriated.
Representative Klein.
Do the federal incentives also apply to leasing?
Yes. Yeah.
So they could get almost, 7,500 plus the 4,800. So against the lease, they could get over 12,000 or whatever my number is. But is that true?
So if people qualify for the various programs that are out there, we could get up to, until the funding ran out,
Oh,
we
right.
could get up to 10,000 from the state, because you had the Replace Your Ride program that provided up to 5,000 if you traded a fossil fuel vehicle that was 10 years or older. You could also then stack that
Yes.
with a new vehicle incentive that's up to 5,000. But then you have utilities, local utilities, GMP that offer, 3,200. WEC, the BEC, they all have different incentive amounts that add to that, and then you have up to the 7,500 for the federal tax credit.
Is that how these stories that if you go into a lease then on top of that, is that how I hear that these leases of electric vehicles are as low as, I've heard all kinds of numbers, but incredibly low on
Less
this.
than $100.
Less than $100 a month for a lease on whatever the term might be, 18 months or some number, but stacking those is how these people, the amazing stories you hear, whether they're urban legend or they're not, that you're getting a lease for an electric car less than $100.
So, our program required that the lease terms be a minimum of 2 years,
Okay.
to prevent like just throwing all the incentives together and calling it a day, with a year lease term or something. So that was one kind of check that we put in place on that. Given the data that we saw just in the abrupt ends of the program, really, we would look at subsidizing leases at a different rate. Understanding that still contributing to a used vehicle market potentially after the lease runs out, but we would also probably look at a different minimum lease term.
Thank you.
Sure. And I think the question came up in committee the last time I was here on how did the leasing arrangements for electric vehicles differ from the fleet, the wider fleet here in the state of Vermont. So Matt Cota was able to provide me these charts, which show clearly that the federal tax credit program has really encouraged leasing deals to occur over twice or almost twice the amount of leasing deals are occurring for electric vehicles. There are other reasons to do it. People have the ability to try things out and not commit fully to purchasing the vehicle, and technology is changing so much that electric vehicles also tend to depreciate much more quickly. Deals with a couple of different areas of concern when people are looking to purchase or lease. The Mileage Smart program also was increasing year over year. So much so that in the first half of the year, there was real concern that the Mileage Smart program would run out. And so through a budget adjustment last year, there was $1 million that was added to the Mileage Smart program. We again used language that was authorized by the legislature in last year's T-bill to then make some transfers, another 400,000 from the Replace Your Ride program to Mileage Smart to again keep that going for the folks who needed it most. We made some of our own changes internally that were permitted by law to change the purchase price cap so that we weren't seeing any kind of vehicles that didn't quite look right. We did see, some that exceeded 40,000. And that really isn't the intent of the program. Some folks, so there isn't we have a income set of guidelines which can be audited. We don't have the ability to look at wealth. So folks, retirees in some cases would have not much income, but more substantial assets. And I think that was fueling in part a couple of the purchases that we saw. So we implemented a $40,000 price cap, and then we, underneath the 80% AMI, we focused more of the funding towards folks that were eligible for SNAP benefits, this is a food assistance program, to deliver an automatic $5,000 regardless of where the purchase price was. It obviously couldn't go below $5,000. It was limited to vehicles that didn't kind of get fully subsidized. So, and then incentive amounts. We were able to reduce the incentive amounts to $2,500 for those that didn't fall into the SNAP guidelines. And that allowed us to space things out to what we hoped would be the introduction of federal funds through the EPA grant. This again gives you geographic distribution, and then the share of people in the last in 2024 who were able to take advantage of the SNAP eligibility. Replace Your Ride. This is the program where people are able to trade in their vehicles, their fossil fuel vehicles, for a variety of different incentives, not just for a used vehicle or a new vehicle, but also other options. That's where you see the mobility card here. People could trade in a vehicle and then use a prepaid mobility card towards bikes, e-bikes, shared mobility services like car sharing, bike sharing. And then, now that public transit has become, has reintroduced fares to the urban areas, that would become something that we'd look at allowing for expenditures through that card. So, but the card limits where people could spend those funds exclusively on the authorized uses by the transportation bill in 2022 that authorized. Again, this closely follows the other programs where we've seen an increase, not just in usage, but in the funding that went to households with lower incomes. And then Electrify Your Fleet is the pilot program that we created out of $500,000 that was repurposed from the Replace Your Ride program when that wasn't moving as quickly as it had towards the end. And so that went to a range of different vehicles for municipalities, businesses, organizations, to be able to try things out for their own fleets and see what worked for them. Lastly, we have the e-bike incentive program for historically over 500 e-bikes have been incentivized. There's still funding left. Talked last time we were here about changes that were made to sort of reintroduce the program, not as a rebate, but as a voucher, so that folks would be able to take a prepaid card and go towards and go to a local shop to be able to make the purchase there. What we did see over the past year was an increase in the number of cargo bikes, electric cargo bikes that were purchased, which allows for greater greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And then folks did take advantage of the carve out that we had for adaptive e-bikes. So lastly, in the report, we don't get deeply into recommendations because there's not much funding left, and it's uncertain where these programs will go. But if there were to be more funding added to them, we would continue to target incentive funding towards Vermonters with lower incomes. Our plan within the EPA grant that we submitted was to do the same as what we were doing with the e-bike program and limit it entirely to folks with lower incomes. What we saw from survey work that we did over the past year with the e-bike program is that really made a difference in the essentiality of the rebate towards the recipient. So in prior iterations, in the first iteration, the e-bike program, some folks were buying bikes that they would have bought anyway. And so the changes that this committee and others in the legislature made enabled funding to really be focused to where it was needed most and to make that incentive worthwhile. So we would look to do the same for the new PV program. We'd continue the other changes that we made in the Mileage Smart program, and the Replace Your Ride program, because it follows both, would also see those kinds of changes. We'd focus again just on vehicle type, those vehicles which would get us the highest gains. So fully electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids as an option for the used vehicle program that tends to have more participation by households with lower incomes. And then also just right sizing those incentive amounts for the lease arrangements. But we did bring up.
You got a question?
I should let you go, but my question is going to be, you could do it at the end. Has there been much follow-up with people who have used the incentives, and then, what are we hearing? Is there anything there to calculate?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of good data from the survey work that was done, and sort of what difference the purchases have made and how people get around and just interact with their neighbors and with their community. So I think we'll that should be a part, I think, of the appendices.
For the e-bikes, it is
Yeah.
it's not for the.
But we're happy to follow up if you have specific questions there.
Yeah.
We do regularly get feedback around the load programs and the electrify your fleet that's mentioned here. We have a number of organizations that have provided sort of testimonials to how this has changed their operations. So on that note, I think for the electrified fleet, there, it's not, that funding is not moving as quickly as we'd like. And so I think a conversation with the committee around incentive amounts, particularly if the federal government does change the Inflation Reduction Act and reduce the commercial clean vehicle tax credits, then that would be something that the state could step in and do in lieu of federal support. So that we'd also look at just targeting more of the funding towards battery electric vehicles to make sure we're getting the highest gains. Going back just one bullet, we did talk briefly, I think, as you were drafting language to send to House Appropriations for the Budget Adjustment Act, we talked about sort of how it would be easier for the agency to kind of make mid-year shifts if we had a little bit more authority in moving money between the statutory programs. So that's Mileage Smart, Replace Your Ride, and New PB program. We had a lot of sort of, particularly right at the end as the funds were being exhausted at different levels and rates, it becomes a little bit complicated and hamstrung if we're sticking to the exact, 50%, no more than 50% of funds going towards a different approach. So that's another conversation, I think, if there were more funding added that we'd like to have with you all.
Representative Burke?
Maybe you told us this at some point, but how much is left in the electric car fleet program?
Yeah, it's roughly 300,000, just over 300,000.
And the electric bike program is
About 20,000 last week checked, yeah.
Does New Hampshire have these same programs?
New Hampshire does not have these same programs. I know you asked earlier if other states have these. There are a number of other states within our region, Massachusetts, Connecticut, further south, New Jersey, New York. And a lot of them have looked to our state for an example of a program that's entirely focused on helping households that need it. Massachusetts and other states have a broader incentive that's available to anyone. So even if you're, going to buy a Tesla and you have no need for it whatsoever, you could receive to do that. Other states have shifted how they operate their incentive programs based on sort of what we've been able to do here in Vermont. And so, yeah, New Hampshire is a different animal altogether.
Other questions? So we're back at the end of the program, we're moving to 4, 5, 6, 4. We had originally scheduled, I know that some of the absences have impacted some of the other piece regarding the next topic. How do we want to, or what was your thought in regards to?
So, I mean, we can speak broadly to.
Broad terms about what's coming, or
Yeah.
if we're all set with questions on the EV status, the electrified fleet, the Replace Your Ride. I suppose if we have any, we're set with questions there. The next 15 or the next portion of the program was there was an anticipated bill that would have been introduced, and we would be talking more specifically about the bill that's coming from, I guess, will be proposed and is coming from the administration side regarding sort of this omnibus climate bill that has lumped in a whole bunch of pieces. Because of certain absences and because of illnesses and whatnot, that bill has not made it out for presentation. But if you would be willing to talk about it in larger general terms, as having had a preview to some degree of what might be coming, so the numbers will be clear. We will have to bring you back to talk about it when the time comes.
Yeah, no problem. So yes, there is not right now released sort of summary of what the administration's proposal is for continuing EV incentive programs, but it was something that was pursued actively, and because of budget considerations, there was these incentive programs have never been funded through the transportation fund. They're generally coming out of the general fund. Actually, back in 2022, the administration proposed significant funding for these through ARPA funds. And then if you remember, those of you who are here, those were swapped out with general funds. And then we intended to apply to an EPA grant and did apply, but weren't able to successfully receive any funding through that. So there's been a search to figure out what might be a sustainable funding source for the next several years. What the administration honed in on is the proceeds from what's called the RGGI program. It's a regional greenhouse gas initiative. There's about, I think, 11 member states, mostly here in New England, Mid-Atlantic as well. And it's essentially a cap and trade system for the electricity sector. This program has been generating a few $1 million every year for the state, and proceeds have generally been going to the electric efficiency utilities that then work on things like weatherization. And this year, I think what's expected is that those proceeds are going to be higher than average, and that will continue for some number of years. So as far as I understand it, the administration is proposing to use net proceeds above a certain amount, potentially $6 million or so, might all the first $6 million, if 6 million is raised, would go towards those activities that have been traditionally supported. Language would then be drafted to direct net proceeds above that amount to the electric vehicle incentive programs. And that kind of how those programs then are structured is open to question as well, but it's a conversation that we'll have with the committee. But that is sort of where the administration is honed in on as a funding source for the next several years going to 2029.
This program exists now, this RGGI program, we
This
are.
program, yes.
Where do those funds, which group, organization, fund, department, where does the money flow through now? Which jurisdiction?
Yeah, it's a good question, probably better answered by somebody other than myself, but I'll take a stab at it. So there's a process that so a cap and invest system, a cap and trade system, there's auctions that happen on a quarterly basis. So electricity, emitters will basically have allowances that are given. Those are auctioned, they're traded. Revenue from that comes back to the member states. Those revenues have to be, I think, certified through the Public Utility Commission. And then, there's going to be a spending plan that's developed with the Climate Action Office for Agency of Natural Resources and the Public Service Department, which, manages a lot of the weatherization. So those are the two entities. Likely, you probably have testimony from staff at those agencies on sort of exactly how the program works and how we would use some of those proceeds for vehicle incentive.
A&R staff was at Senate Natural Resources last Friday afternoon, explaining the REGI program to them.
Yes, I just, and I don't know if you know this, but I was wondering if the timing of it all, when will these credits or available funds be available to us? This would be like a year delay implementation? Do we have to wait to make sure we're over the threshold, or does it have, these auctions happen like June 31st, and we'll know going in for a new fiscal year that the funds are gonna be there?
Yeah, so they're done on a quarterly basis. I don't know the exact dates. But there will probably have to be some figuring out of, you know, when are we like capitalized enough to begin issuing incentives so that the next, you know, group of proceeds is covering the costs, and we're able to kind of continue the program as best we can without interruption. So the timing, it will be something that needs to be worked out. But it's, you know, it's done on a quarterly basis, and then there's some time lag from, you know, when the funding actually comes to the state, and then the PUC process to sort of certify it, and then an interdepartmental transfer and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is, we're on the back end, we're on the back nine. We need to get that $6 million threshold, then we kick in.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, if it's done by quarterly, we're looking at the third or fourth quarter, is what I'm saying, right?
I don't think it's yet figured out
Oh.
whether there's funding now to sort of begin with, or whether we have to start at some, you know, later date, you know, from July 1.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait a little while longer before we can delve in there any further,
Yeah.
huh? Anybody else have any piece? Then we'll take a, we'll be back in our seats and start on time at 2:15.